let's begin this class with the topic pollination. Pollination is not a new topic to you, it's a familiar topic. What is pollination? Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the pistil. Pollination is a wonderful process by which it provides food and shelter to the pollinating animals. You know, there are number of pollinating agents which dusted the pollen grains from anther to the stigma. In this flower, here there is a stamen. The stamen which contains anther. In the anther, pollen grains are present, and this is the stigmatic surface of the pistil, stigma style ovary. Ovules are present here. The pollen grains are dusted from anther to stigma. This process is called as pollination. Transfer of pollen grains from this anther to the stigmatic surface of the pistil is called as, this is stamen and it is pistil. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the pistil is called pollination. Pollination is the specific characteristic feature of spermatophytes. What are spermatophytes? Gymnosperms and angiosperms. In gymnosperms, it is called as direct gymnosperms. Gymnosperm and angiosperm. In gymnosperms, pollination is direct pollination. Angiosperms, it is indirect. Do you think if there is no pollination, is there any fruit and seed formation? No. So, pollination is very important process. Here, gymnosperm pollination is direct because we all know that the gymnosperms, the ovules are exposed out, exposed ovules, and the transfer of pollen grain or dusted, the pollen grains are dusted on the exposed ovule called direct pollination. And angiosperms, it is called indirect pollination. Here in this angiosperms, most of the angiosperms, there are some adaptations observed in the flower. The flowers in angiosperms are two different types, chasmogamous flower and clistogamous. What's the difference among these two? Chasmogamous flower and the clistogamous flower. Chasmogamous flowers are exposed its sex organs, that is anther and the stamen and the pistil exposed out. The flowers are open and the stamen and pistils are exposed out. While in clistogamous flower, these organs are not exposed out, which is closed. The flowers are not open, the flowers are closed flowers. Let's see one example, Camelina bengalensis. This flower, this plant is Camelina bengalensis. So, this plant produces two different kind of flower. These flowers are called as chasmogamous flower. The floral parts are exposed out for pollination. But in the underground stem of rhizome, there are clistogamous flower, which is within the closed flower. The floral parts are closed. The flower is not open. It is a closed flower. To promote self-pollination, before learning this clistogamous and chasmogamous, there are different types of pollination based on the flower on which the pollen grain reaches the stigma. Pollination, it is classified into two different types based on the flower where the pollen grains are reaches to the stigma. Autogamy and allogamy. Auto, as you know that auto is the self-pollinated flowers. Self-pollination, autogamy or cross-pollination. Pollination, there are two different types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination flowers are known as autogamy cross-pollination flowers are known as allogamy. Based on the mechanism and adaptations observed in autogamous flower and allogamous flower, again it is classified into different types. In autogamy, the flowers which shows different mechanism and adaptations. One of the adaptation is clistogamy. As I mentioned earlier, here this is the flower, the example Camelina bengalensis, and Viola, another example oxalis. These all flowers shows clistogamous flower. But in Camelina bengalensis, two different types of flowers present in the same plant. The aerial part which produces the chasmogamous flower, and the phenomenon of this pollination is called as chasmogamy. Here the clistogamous flower and the phenomenon is called as clistogamy. The aerial part of the plant which produces the chasmogamous flower. The flower is open flower and the floral parts are exposed out. The essential organs, stamen and the pistils are exposed out to promote self-pollination. And self-pollination mainly occurs in the bisexual flowers. To promote pollination, the androecium and gynoecium present in the same flower of the same plant. So, self-pollination or autogamy. These clistogamous flowers are present below the soil, that is underground, or there are some subterranean branches of this underground rhizome which produces the flower. These closed flowers, these flowers are open flowers. These flowers are closed flowers. Within the closed flowers, the organs, the sex organs like the stamen and the pistil is present to promote self-pollination within this closed flower. This type of pollination is called as clistogamy, and the flower adaptation is called as clistogamous. So, these two types of flower is important. Two terms are important, chasmogamous and clistogamous. Another adaptation observed in autogamy is homogamy. So, clistogamy, homogamy, incomplete dichogamy are the adaptations or mechanism found in autogamous flower. In homogamy, homo is the same. Homogamy, these organs, stamen and pistil, which matures at the same time. To promote self-pollination, the androecium and gynoecium or the stamen and pistil which matures at the same time, that is called homogamy. All the definitions are important. Homogamy is the condition where the mature of anther and gynoecium, stamen and pistil in the same time. Then incomplete example, what are the example? Mirabilis jalapa and Catharanthus roseus are few examples of homogamous flower. Then incomplete dichogamy, homogamy opposite dichogamy. This is homogamy at the same time maturation taking place. Here in dichogamy, different, dichogamy, different time, anther and gynoecium matures. Androecium and gynoecium matures at different time, that is dichogamy. In this flower, here sometimes it is incomplete dichogamy. So, it promotes self-pollination. When it matures in different times, sometimes there will be a overlapping of this androecium and gynoecium which promotes self-pollination. That is called incomplete dichogamy. So, these three mechanisms or these three adaptations are examples for or the types of autogamy. Another type of pollination is allogamy. Allogamy is the process cross-pollination. Pollination taking place, that means dusting of pollen grain from anther to stigma of different flower. Different flower, it is again classified into two different types. In this, they are named as gittanogamy and xenogamy. Gittanogamous flower or the unisexual flowers which are present in the same plant. You know, unisexual flower, there are male and female flowers are present in the same plant. So within the same plant, different flowers, the pollination taking place, transfer of pollen grains taking place is called geitonogamy. Xenogamy, this is also cross pollination, but the difference is transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of different flowers present in different plant. Male and female flowers are present in two different plant, where the cross pollination taking place is called xenogamy. So geitonogamy, xenogamy. So this geitonogamy flower and xenogamy comes under the type of allogamy. Now let us see, there are some contrivances of cross pollination. Contrivances are otherwise called as outbreeding devices. What are the outbreeding devices? There are some contrivances to promote cross pollination. They are classified, this classification is important. They are classified into two different types, dicliny and monocliny. You know that there are unisexual flowers as well as bisexual flowers are present. Most of the cases bisexual flowers. So it shows the dicliny which shows unisexuality and monocliny which shows bisexuality. Let's see what are the types under this. In dicliny or unisexuality, there are two different types of flower seen, monoecious condition and dioecious condition. Monoecious. In monoecious is the unisexual. These two types, monoecious and dioecious, are unisexual flowers, unisexuality which shows. The unisexual flowers are present, that means male flowers separate, female flowers separate, unisexual. In unisexual, monoecious, the male flower and the female flower present within the same plant. Plant is same but flowers are different. Male and female flowers are separate. That is monoecious. Example, Ricinus communis. So, Ricinus communis, the upper part of the rachis in the inflorescence, upper part which produces female flower and the lower part which produces male flower. So, that is one of the monoecious condition. Dioecious. Dioecious, two different plant which produces two different types of flower, male in one plant, female in another plant. Very simple example, very common example is borassus and carica. Borassus, the palm plant, and carica, papaya, where we can find two different plants. The male plant separate, female plant separate, and the flowers are produced in different plant. That is dioecious condition. Then monocliny. So this is the type which is dicliny or unisexuality. Dicliny. So dicliny, there are two different types, monoecious and dioecious. Monoecious example Ricinus communis, dioecious example borassus and carica. Now monocliny or bisexuality, bisexual flowers, monocliny or bisexuality. Here there are different types, dichogamy, hercogamy, heterostyly, self-sterility. Under monocliny, there are four different types of flowers have been observed. Dichogamy, the first type is called as dichogamy, then hercogamy, heterostyly, self-sterility. Dichogamy, the maturation of these organs, sex organs, andrecium and gynoecium, in different time. Based on this, there are two different types, protandry and protogyny. Protandry, protogyny. What is meant by protandry? In protandry is the condition, where andrecium, here the name is protandry, Androecium matures earlier than the gynoecium. The condition is called as protandry. Protogyny, as the name itself you learned, protogyny. Gynoecium matures earlier than androecium. Such a condition is called as protogyny. So, dichogamy, di is two different times. The anther and the gynoecium matures. Based on this, there are two different types. They are protandry, protogyny. Protandry, androecium mature earlier than gynoecium. In protogyny, gynoecium matures earlier than androecium. This is coming under dichogamy. Then another type is called as hercogamy. Hercogamy, in this, the adaptations of the flower to prevent this self-pollination, this all comes under mechanisms or adaptations of the cross-pollination. So, to prevent self-pollination, the flowers are arranged in such a way. There is an example, Gloriosa superba. So, this flower is Gloriosa superba, where the floral organs, the essential organs are arranged in such a way to prevent self-pollination. Look at this diagram. This is the gynoecium and it shows the stigmatic part. These are the stamens. The stigmatic surface is away from the stigma is reflects away from the androecium. These are the androecium, the pollen grains are present inside. So, this stigmatic region, the pollen grains can dusted on the stigmatic surface, but in this flower the adaptation is seen that this is reflects away from the androecium. So, in hibiscus also we can see this. In hibiscus, here is the stigma, this region, stigma, style and ovary inside. Outside we may find the stamens. Here are the stamens. The stamens are present below, and this is the gynoecious stigmatic region which is protrude out of the anther. So, this hibiscus and this Gloriosa superba, the stigmatic surface is away from the androecium. So, these two are example, hibiscus and Gloriosa superba. The term is hercogamy. The term of this type of arrangement is called as hercogamy. Then another type is called as heterostyly. Hetero, the meaning hetero is different types of style, heterostyly. So, based on this heterostyly, there are two different types. They are distyly and tristyly. Di, 2, tri, 3. So, distyly, there are two different styles. The length of the style is different. Tristyly, there are three different lengths of style. So, distyly and tristyly. Look at this diagram, distyly. Here two diagrams are there, two flowers which shows, this is the pistil, long style which is called as pin, the long style known as pin, and here the style is short style, that is thumb-eyed. So, two different types of flower, pin and thumb-eyed. What's pin? Long style, and short style is called as thumb-eyed. In this, the length of the stamen and androecium. So, here in this distyly, two different lengths of style and anther. So, stamen length and the style length. This length is long, this length is short, style length. And here the anther is present here, and in this flower anther is present there. To promote pollination, this anther, the pollen grain from this anther dusted on this stigmatic surface, and the pollen grain of this anther dusted on the stigmatic surface of this type. This type of arrangement is called as distyly. In the same length of the stigma and the anther of the another flower in the same level. Likewise, this anther and this stigmatic region, To promote cross pollination, it is arranged in such a way. Likewise, tri-styly, there are 3 different lengths of style observed in this flower. Here this example is primula. Di-styly example primula and tri-styly example lythrum. Lythrum is the example of tri-styly. In this, look at this, 3 different lengths of style. This is very long style stigma, this is the style, and this is somewhat short than this, and here it is very short. 3 different types of style present in different flowers in lythrum. And here is the stamen. So here the pollination of this transfer of pollen from this anther dusted on this flower, and here there are different lengths of stamen, a long stamen and a short stamen. So from this pollen grain, from this anther, the pollen grain is dusted on this stigmatic surface. From this long stamen, the pollens are dusted in this region. So 2 different flowers, the pollination taking place, but it cannot possible, it is impossible to dust it from the same flower. Likewise, in this, the pollen, this is the stigma. From here, this anther, this pollen grain from this anther dusted on this stigmatic surface, and this pollen grain from this anther dusted the stigmatic surface of this. So such a way these flowers are arranged. Example, lythrum, the type of styly is tri-styly. Depend upon the length of stamen and length of style, there are different types of flowers. Then the last type is self-sterility. It is one of the contrivances, self-sterility, or it is called incompatibility. Self-sterility, or it is known as incompatibility. One of the example is abutilin. In this, the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma is carried out, but it do not develop the pollen tube, or the pollen tube germination do not taking place. So such flowers are called as self-sterility or incompatibility. Example, abutilin. I hope that you understand it clear. So today you learned about pollination in brief. There are different types of pollination to promote self and cross pollination. There are different types. This classification is very important. First you learn all these names, what are the types, very clear, and each one is the definition. Each type is the definition with example, and draw all these diagrams in the class note. Thank you.